I'm one of those people who track my writing projects. I've been doing it for 14 years and I really like doing it. So in this video, I'm gonna go through what I've been tracking, why I've been doing it, and a little bit how I'm gonna change it up, and basically what I'm using this tracking for. I've talked before about why I like tracking. I'm going to link that video in the description. But for now, the important part is that I like being able to see how I've been doing with my writing. Because I am using, and above all, I am intending to start using my tracking as a way to figure out what is the best writing routine for me. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know that I've been struggling a little bit with finding a writing routine that works for me. And I am now going to start trying to use my tracking to figure out a routine that is sustainable for me, which I think is a big step forward in taking my writing more seriously and properly committing to it. My tracking is also still evolving. What I have right now is not what I will always have, and in fact I'm already working on a way to make it even more detailed. But before I get to that, I am going to just go through how I've been tracking my writing, and we'll see where that takes us. It's going to take us to now and how I track now, but yeah. Basically, I'm going to show you how my tracking has developed, and I started tracking on February 2nd, 2006. There is the first line of tracking that I did. I'm going to go back to December because I have a reason to be in December. So this is the spreadsheet that I used in 2006, and it's basically looked more or less the same since then with some slight alterations. So this first column here is the date, and the next 6 are stories that I was working on at the time. And the reason here that I'm showing you December is because in December, on December 23rd, I switched from working on Dimension, which I hadn't worked on for a few weeks, to instead working on Black Moon. So that's what I did if I wanted to work on more than 6 projects in a month, which I used to do back then. I don't really do that anymore. So in each of these columns, I would put how much I wrote on that particular story on that particular day. And then this line is how much I wrote in total that day on all stories. This column is how much I had total that month so far. I had that on Sundays and then at the very end of the month. This column here is my goal, and this one here is how well I did with the goal, basically. And the reason I started December off with 12 here is because I was 10 pages behind at the end of November, as this little bit shows you. So basically I moved those up to December, and then I had a goal of writing 2 pages in December every day. And yes, in 2006 I started tracking pages. I was not tracking words yet because I didn't know that that was a thing that you could do. I don't remember again why I started tracking. It just happened. I just wanted to see how I was doing, and pages what was mattered to me at the time. My total count for 2006 was 802.52 pages, which is probably in words somewhere around 520,000. I used the same tracking system for a few years with no changes whatsoever, and my total in 2007 was 494.52 pages, which is roughly 320,000 words. In 2008, it was 473 pages, which was roughly then 305,000 words. In 2009, I wrote 5,206 pages, which should be around 340,000 words. And in 2010, I wrote 794 pages, which again should be somewhere around 515,000 words. In 2010, I discovered Nanowrimo, or rather I did Nanowrimo for the first time, and so in 2011 I started counting words, because I had realized that words were a more accurate way of tracking, but I was still counting pages as well as words, which is good because this year is how I figured out roughly how many words those pages in the previous years would be equal to. And I wasn't always great at tracking the words. As you can see here, I tracked pages here, but I didn't track any words because I forgot to. So, yeah. But either way, apart from adding words, I kept the tracking pretty much the same in 2011, and my total was around 440,000 words. In 2012, I stopped counting pages and instead only counted words, but otherwise the setup is pretty much the same. It's the date, it's the project, it's the total words for the day, total for the month, and my goal. What I did do in 2012 was that I started adding these kinds of notes, which told me if something had happened that day that explained why I got so few words. So you can see here on January 13th I got sick, and on January 16th school started. So that explained the, I guess, relatively low word counts. Basically, if I had an excuse, this Monday the 16th I had an excuse. On the Sunday, I didn't think that I had an excuse. 2012 is also an interesting year because I made a decision that year that I was going to write every single day. And as you can see here, I managed. I wrote, sometimes I only wrote a little bit, but I wrote every single day until December 11th, which was the day of the Hobbit movie, the first Hobbit movie premiering. And I went to the midnight premiere and I completely forgot to write that day. It's the only day on that entire year that is 0, and I remember how angry I was with myself when I realized the day after that I hadn't written a single word. But either way, I still think it's a pretty good achievement to actually have written every single day except one in a year. I have never repeated that achievement. Still, in 2012, I wrote 687,814 words and exceeded my goal of 612,530. And the reason I had such an odd goal, because I also think that's a very odd goal, 530, but the reason for that is that at the time, I based my goal each month on sort of how I'd done the previous months. So here in January, my goal was to write 1,130 words a day based on how I'd done the months before in 2011. And here in February, as you can see, I exceeded my goal. Wrote 44,000 words, and I exceeded my goal in March as well. So here in April, I made my goal a little larger because I thought I could do that, and I also could. Just barely, but I could. In 2013, I was still trying to write every day, but I had a couple of slips. I managed to write 3 words here on February 24th, despite being sick. I have some zeros down here in July because I was at a LARP and couldn't write then. And then I again have a 0 down here in December, on December 10th for another Hobbit premiere, which is just such a waste. Total for 2013 was 610,478 words, which was less than my goal of 647,300 words. And that sort of sets off my years of slipping, both in my writing and in my tracking. So both 2014 and 15, I wrote less than I wanted to, and I didn't track all of the words I wrote. But in 2014, I did track 406,614 words, and in 2015, 335,786 words, which was well below my goal of 445,700. Didn't do great there, but yeah. We're moving on to 2016 when I started adding in tracking how many minutes I had spent writing. I don't remember why. I don't know if that was when you started being able to track minutes instead of words in Camp Nano, maybe, or if it was something else. But either way, that's what I started doing. Again, as with when I went from pages to words, I wasn't always great at tracking the time. Sometimes I forgot to check how much time I had actually spent writing. I still forget that 4 years later. So yeah, I'm getting better. Actually, come to think about it, I think that part of the reason why I started tracking minutes instead of words, or minutes as well as words, was that I'd realized that my method of tracking editing words wasn't great, because I think I was counting like every edited word was half a word, and every retyped word was a quarter of a word or something like that. I don't quite remember exactly what I was doing, but I think actually in 2016 the reason that I started tracking time was to be able to track properly when I was editing as well as when I was writing. I think so. But anyway, in 2016 I also, as you can see here, I was really bad both at writing and at actually tracking how much I wrote, because yeah, I don't really know why. Actually, I do know why. In 2016, I was starting to burn out, and that's probably the reason why this looks like it does. Anyway, my tracked words for 2016 are 77,574 in my own document, plus the 51,099 words that I tracked for Nanowrimo, but didn't track in this document here. So the total for 2016 was 128,673 words. The total hours I tracked was 63 hours and 15 minutes, but that's not accurate in any way, shape, or form. So the next few years, again, I was bad at writing, I was bad at tracking, but what I did track was in 2017, 201,052 words over 127 hours and 10 minutes. In 2008, it was 152,606 words over 149 hours and 10 minutes. And in 2019, it was 179,665 words over 122 hours and 25 minutes. Again, those are not entirely accurate, but those are the numbers that I have to work with, and yeah. Anyway, now we are in 2020, and I have added 2 things to my tracking system. I also at some point removed the goal for each month. I don't remember when I did that. I could probably check, but it doesn't really matter. I don't really have goals as such anymore at the moment. But I've added 2 things in my tracking in 2020. And the first thing was that in February, I started tracking how I felt about my writing. So that's this column here, where green is good, yellow is okay, orange is meh, and red is bad. I also have a lighter version of red and green where I've written too little to really be sure, but I'm leaning towards it being good or bad. And then in April here I changed so that these columns are no longer which project I'm working on, but it is at which time of the day that I was writing. So it's morning, so it's morning, it's during the day, and it's evening and night. These are pretty loosely defined at the moment, but I am going to change this tracking so that it is between these hours and between these hours and between these hours, because I think that's going to be important for me to know. And when I did that to keep track of which project I was working on, I made these colors happen, which indicate which project. So green is arc, blue is estuary, and so on. And I really like this because it's more colorful and fun, and I like colorful and fun. And numbers. So it's colorful and fun and numbers, so it's the whole package. Now 2020 isn't over yet, so my tracking isn't perfect here. I am recording this in the beginning of September, and so far I have 278,499 words over 227.36 hours. And I've been pretty good at tracking hours this year, but as you can see, here, for example, I forgot to track how long this took me, so it's not entirely accurate. So basically, since 2006, I have tracked 5,268,581 words total that I've written, which is pretty cool. It's a pretty good number. Basically, as you can see here on this beautiful graph, in the past few years, since 2016, I haven't been doing great compared to previous years. And again, like I said, there are reasons for this. In 2016, I started burning out, which I didn't really get help for until 2019. And so it's completely understandable that I wrote less in those years than I did previous years. But the point is that just looking at it like this, at a graph like this, I know that I can do better word count-wise than I've been doing in the past few years. And so I can start working on getting better and getting more words again. So that brings me to, what do I get out of this tracking? Why do I do it? And like I said earlier, I am going to use these numbers and use these numbers that I already have and use the numbers that I track in the next year or so to get to know my writing process better. And especially since I started adding which time of day I write and how I feel about my writing process, I should be able to use all of this once I have a little bit more data to create a working writing routine. I should be able to figure out when am I the most productive in terms of months and days and time of day and stuff like that. Also, how I feel about my writing. Do I actually write better in the evening and night as I think I do? Or do I actually feel better about my writing if I do it in the middle of the day? I'm not sure yet. So some of this is just for my own personal curiosity, but also once I have more data, I can hopefully, probably create a writing routine that is sort of scientifically proven to be the best one for me. And I will then have something to point to when I say that I write better in the evenings, and it won't just be me making excuses to not write until it's evening because I say, no, but I write better in the evening. I don't have to write during the day. I mean, I really do think that I write better in the evening, but it would be nice to have data to back that statement up. Again, I'm also changing up how I track and making it a little bit more detailed, and I'm going to make a video about how I do it now once I have that new tracking in place. So don't forget to subscribe so that you can see that one when it shows up. Until then, here are some other videos that you might want to see, and thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.